Hello and welcome to Whisky.com, where fine spirits meet. And today I'm here in the middle of the Speyside in Craigellachie. And yeah, the weather is really Scottish, the rain is coming from all sides, so yeah, that is the true Scottish experience. And if you want to have the true Speyside experience, this is actually a very nice inn. I've actually never stayed there overnight, but it has a whiskey bar that is excellent. There are so many old bottlings there and so many open bottles that you can actually try, and the card is long. And there are tastings you can have, like different regions. It's a bit specialized on Speyside and Japan, as I think the owner is Japanese, and there are more Highlander inns in Asia, in Tokyo, in Jakarta, and all over the place. Even in Shishibu is one. I think he got good connections to Shishibu. So yeah, if you want to have a really nice tasting, go to the Highlander Inn. But today it's not going to be about the Highlander Inn. Today we want to see the Craigellachie Distillery here at Craigellachie town. The history of the distillery starts 1891 with two characters that couldn't be any different. The first one was Alexander Edward, and the second one was Peter Mackey. Alexander Edward was a calm person. He was a nice person. He had a lot of money, so he could give out a lot of money to people as well. So he was a really pleasant person to be with. And the other one, Peter, was more of a businessman. He was tough, he was hard, he was arguing, he was shouting at the government, even so much that he was written in the newspapers. And so these were the two characters that founded the distillery. And the distillery says, yeah, they are like our spirit. You have that on one side, you have that fruitiness, that pineapple, that niceness, and on the other side you have the sulfury character, a bit of harsh character, and yeah, that symbolizes then Peter. So yeah, bit of a nice story. What is also nice is just 2 years after the distillery opened, Alexander Bernhard came along. I don't know if you know this, kind of like a bit of my idol. He went around all of Scotland and visited all of the distilleries and written everything down, talked to the people, and just wrote a book about every distillery. And in '95, Horst, my father, went around Scotland and he photographed all the distilleries. So you could see all the stills, and he had made posters out of that, kind of innovative back in '95. And when I visited now the distilleries, I try to visit all the distilleries and I try to do all the videos about the distilleries. So yeah, kind of in their footsteps. So yeah, Alexander Bernhard came here in 1893 and he saw the distillery, a new distillery just opened 2 years ago, and he tried it, talked to them, and then he found like, oh, this is really an old Speyside style, not like the other distilleries who are switching to the new Speyside style. So even back in the days, there were people going about like old style was better, and yeah, so yeah, he found that the distillery made a really old style of whiskey. Yeah, and what is also nice about the distillery, about the generations here. There's a man here working, and he's named James Arthur Nichol Jr. And yeah, his father, James Arthur Nichol, worked also here, and a few generations up there. And the first one in that family worked here in 1915. So he probably worked with the founders as well, so or the first generation that built up that distillery. So really nice to have a local family, really very involved with the distillery. And by the way, James Arthur Nichol Jr. is already over 50 years old. So yeah, it's a generational thing, and I love that. That is really cool. In the 60s, they did an expansion, so they went from 2 stills to 4 stills, and they stopped direct firing later, and they also stopped the malting floors just to get more into the production. The distillery is, you have single malt whiskies, but it is mainly in the blending industry as well. And yeah, so that is about the history, and let me show you a little bit of a testimony of time. These were the old manholes. The manholes today are lighter, you can turn them up easily, and they're all still made of, I think, brass, because brass doesn't make any sparks, which is important for when you work with alcoholic fumes that are flammable. And just to imagine how you have to open these things every time you want to clean them. And yeah, back in the days there were no cleaning systems in stills, so you had to open the manhole every time, get in with a brush probably and a bucket and just clean it out. And today they nearly don't open them anymore because you have automatic cleaning systems and you don't want to have that much atmospheric exchange there. So that was it with the history. Let's get into the distillery and find out how they make their whiskey. The two main ingredients for whiskey are malt and water. The water for the Craigellachie Distillery comes from the Blue Hill, from the Alachroy burn. They have a pipe going up there. They don't take it from the burn like at the end, but they want to go beyond the fields of sheep and cattle to have a really clear water source. So they tap the water very near to the spring to get a good, clean, consistent water. The other ingredient, as I mentioned, is malt. And the first step of treating that malt is grinding it down in a malt mill. And the malt mill doesn't grind it down like a flour mill, so you don't hammer it down to the very, very fine bits, but it's more of a coarse grist. So two-stage roller mill, the first one just opens it up and the second one breaks it a little bit down. And you come to three main parts of your coarse grist, and that is the husks, the grits, and the flour. So the husks are about 20%, 70% should be grits, and then 10% flour. If you grind it down too fine, you might end up with a dough. If you grind it down too coarse, you might get into inefficient territory. So that 20, 70, 10, that is the sweet spot. And most of the distilleries do that. Some of them change it a little bit just depending on the style they want to make, because it affects a little bit of the flavor in the process as well. The next step is the mashing. You take exactly 10.15 tons of grist and put it into the mash tun. And yeah, it's a very, very modern mash tun. They have changed the mash tun from a very old system that was not as high in diameter but very tall, so it didn't fit in the old mashing house. So what they had to do, they had to repurpose the old kiln as they didn't need it anymore, and it fit in perfectly. Very, very modern mash tun. You see it a lot from beer brewers, so this is like the latest technology from the beer brewers. It's very efficient. You can set everything that you want for the mashing, how you want it. And yeah, very, very modern. What they do here is a bit different. They do it very efficiently. They have 4 stages of mashing. So they have the sparging at the beginning, and then they have a lautering with 75 degrees Celsius, which they then use, and another recycling one with 75, and another 85 recycling one. So they take really everything out before it is the draft that has to be used for something else. Yeah, when we're done here, it goes out as a very, very sugary liquid where all the starches have been split in with enzymes into sugar, and this sugar have been diluted into the water, and that is exactly what we need. The next step is the production of alcohol. So we have the fermentation. We can take the sugar, we add about 205 something liters of yeast, and we ferment it for 56 hours. And that alcoholic fermentation gives you CO2 that bubbles up, and also it turns into energy, it becomes a bit warmer, and also the alcohol. But whiskey is not about the alcohol. Alcohol is just the means of transporting the flavors. So if you just go for the alcohol, you could go like 40 hours, maybe 45, 48 hours of alcoholic fermentation. But they're going for 56 to create some flavors. But they are on a little bit of a, they have to balance it out a little bit. They want to have a little bit of a fruity touch in it, which they do, but they also want to retain the sulfuriness. with the lactobacterial fermentation that happens after 48 hours, you would take out a lot of these sulfurs. So they have to limit themselves to 56 hours to retain a bit of that sulfuriness in there. You have a good amount of fruitiness, but when you smell really into it, you still have that sulfur. It's nearly hidden, but it is in there. And that is important for the distillery because that's what they are looking for to create as a distillery character. Yeah, the vessels are 48,000 liters of volume that you can fill in. They have 8 of them made of Siberian larch. Siberian larch is just the family of trees. They can be also grown in Scotland or elsewhere. But it's a very nice tree for making washbacks. So with these 9% wash, we're going off to the distillation. This is the still house of Craigellachie. And yeah, let's start off with that beautiful view. It's really, really beautiful. It's nice, and you have that roller windows. That is just a really nice working place. We start off with the wash stills. The wash stills are charged with 24,000 liters in volume, and they are burning pretty fast. And let me tell you a little bit of a story about the wash stills. There's a nice story going on in the distillery. They, in the late 50s, beginning 60s, they had still deck firing, one wash still, and they had a cat. And they didn't have any windows or watch glasses on the wash still, so they had to rely on the old method of banging a rubber ball against the top of the wash still to see if it's still hollow, if there's something inside, and then you had to turn it down. But the workers at the distillery realized, okay, the cat's coming in when we start the wash still because, yeah, it's nice, it's warm, so it can relax near the wash still. But at some point, the cat leaves. And they realized, okay, well, why is the cat leaving? And they realized it coincidence that when they turn down the wash still, just before that, the cat leaves. And they realized the cat hates the alcoholic fumes that come from the wash still. And they could have that really as an indicator, when do we have to turn down the wash still? Because you start it up and you start to burn, and then at some point you have to turn it down. It's like boiling milk. It starts, there's nothing going on, and at some point it just bubbles a lot. And you have to really find that point, that, I don't know, a few minutes, and you have to turn it down, otherwise it boils over, and that is really dangerous. So they really had their cat to see when to have that, and it was kind of a safety factor there. Yeah. So let's continue in the present, and let's continue with the spirit still. The spirit still is really where the flavor happens. The spirit still is the most influential part in the distillery. Here at the Craigellachie Distillery, we have a wide, big still, 23,000 liters. It's not that tall, and as you can see here, the line arm is very flat. If it would be rising, it would kind of lengthen the still. If it's falling, it's just the normal still, because everything that condenses within the line arm flows into the spirit vat and not into the pot. So yes, pretty fast, pretty straightforward, not that much copper contact, not that much reflux, and that's what they want to have. They want to preserve their sulfur content in the spirit. So they still have a very fruity spirit, but you have a bit of that sulfuriness in there, and that is kind of the character of Craigellachie, and that's what they want to preserve. It goes on, you have the warm tops, so you don't have the shell and tube where you have a lot of copper contact and it makes it very, very smooth, but you have the shell and tube, and they run it cold and slow. So they cool it down pretty quickly, and that means that everything condenses pretty quickly and pretty early. And what they see is that the condensation of their spirit is pretty oily, and it makes a little bit of an oil film around the wall in the condenser. And that means that the vapors cannot touch the copper so good, because there's an insulation layer of that oil. And that also means less copper contact, and the sulfuric or the sulfur taste is still preserved in the spirit. Yeah, so that is the spirit, and let's continue. This was it with the production, and let's have a little bit of a tasting and a little interview with Matthew Cordiner. You've been 15 years in the business, and what was it, 5 years with...
with John Dewar and Sons.
With John Dewar and Son. And yeah, we've already had you twice on, so like 2 weeks ago, and the one with Aberfeldy, so you should be a character that people already know a bit.
Brilliant.
So yeah, thank you very much for having us at the distillery.
My pleasure as well. And although obviously I represent a few different distilleries, I'm not meant to be biased, I'm not meant to have a favourite. This is definitely my favourite. Not only is this a brand I represent, this is literally my hometown. This is where I'm from in Scotland. So yeah, very much the favourite.
Yeah, it's lovely. I've driven past it really a couple of times, and I was like, oh yeah, yeah. And it's very nice to see how the spirit is made, and I never thought about that. There's so much behind it, and I love the fact that you still have the old warm tubs and all that going on. I'm really excited about what we're gonna have today.
Great. Well, we've got quite a selection to try. I thought the nicest thing when you're getting to know a distillery and its character is actually starting with some new make spirits. Yeah. So
I was looking forward to that.
Well, I think it's a very unusual new make. Because again, as soon as we know this, it's a bit of a colder day here in Scotland. But yeah, so I think warming it up is a very good idea there.
Is it straight from the still, like 70, or is it barreling strength?
70%. Yeah, so this is straight from the still as well. So we're sitting at 70.1% ABV. You can see there's that lovely sweetness already. We've definitely got a lot of fruits in there, but there's this kind of sweet sulfury note as well.
It is in there, but I have to say 70% hard to tell.
Yeah, splash of water.
Has a bit of an alcoholic note.
If we were to add a little bit of water, you really see that kind of sulfur developing.
But very fruity as well.
Very fruity. I think it's a very tropical new make already, right, before we even start to age it. For me, again, sulfur gets a bad name a lot of the time. A lot of people think, sulfur like rotten eggs. It's this kind of horrible note. But for me, sulfur is a spectrum. At one end, you have rotten eggs. At the other end, you have almost this like candy floss, synthetic sweetness kind of note as well. So for me, this is kind of where we're into here. It's this more sort of sweet end of the sulfur spectrum. And as we start to go through the range, you're going to see how this develops into some really interesting flavour notes. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, I think you need to breathe a bit to get that one.
But every time I go back now, you really start to see that smoky note. Do you see what I mean? So it's not like an Isla medicinal kind of TCP smoke. It really is that kind of toasted, a little kind of funky, quite an interesting flavour note there, right?
Very sweet.
Very sweet.
Very fresh, fruity. Bit of a tropical note in there, yeah, definitely. I think that tropical note might come over more when you have more water in it. It's a bit hefty when you have it at 70, yeah. Bit of an unfair bias, because I usually get it at casking strength, or sometimes even watered down to 40 or something like that.
And I think that leads us beautifully into the Craigellachie 13. So this is our kind of welcome to the family, or beginning of the range. And again, a lot of people say 13. That's not a very common age expression. As you'll have found out from going round our distillery, we like to do things our own way. We're pretty old school, we're pretty stubborn, I think, as a distillery. So again, when we're starting to decide, putting an age statement range together, 12 was good. 13 just that little bit better, a little sweet spot. So across the whole range, some quite unusual numbers.
Yeah, I think a lot of distilleries have 12, and you just like one more.
Yeah, exactly. That's it. We'll see your 12, and we'll up you one there with Craigellachie 13. But for me, this is one of my all-time favourite whiskies. I think I'm sure you've had this once or twice yourself as well, right? But it's that perfect balance of the kind of more modern, I would say, in a way, Speyside kind of tropical notes, but you still have that something unusual at the back, right?
Tons of tropical in there.
Yeah.
From the new make, yes, yes, a bit, but here this is a lot more. Yeah, I know why Alfred Bernard said pineapple. I think you still kept that.
And somehow. I think that's the great thing. You think this is a guy way back in 1893 talking about pineapples. We nose this glass today in 2023, and you're still getting that sort of same flavour note coming through.
But I find what is nice that you have someone complaining like, yeah, this is like the old style, the other's not. A lot of people do that today, and a lot of people did that 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And what I also do like is that you have that stereotype of some connoisseur nosing the whiskey and going like, pineapple. They did it back in the day as well.
There's something nice about that, right? But it's not just pineapple. And I think for me, we've got quite a complicated makeup here for creating a 13. We have that initial maturation for us is some refill casks, mostly refill bourbon, some rechar casks as well. And we also have some first fill. So first fill ex-bourbon, first fill ex-sherry. So we combine all of those after maturation up to 13 years, in those casks. We combine that mix together, and then we're going to split that 50-50 and put that combination 50-50, 50% back into first fill bourbon for finishing, 50% back into first fill sherry for finishing for about 6 months. And I think that's why you have this lovely, there's a spiciness, there's a full-bodiedness to Craigellachie. And I think that finishing in first fill is a big part of that. But
sounds a little bit like a complicated.
I'm sure the warehousing team are not a big fan of Stephanie and what she does. It's a lot of extra work for them, but I think what you get in the glass is extraordinary as a result of that. And again, you can't talk about our whiskey without talking about Stephanie McLeod as our malt master. She is one of the most award-winning whiskey makers in the world now, and I think why she wins all these awards is her ability to create balance in a whiskey. And what I mean by balance is you've got this huge array of flavors coming through, but you can always tell which distillery it's from. That DNA, that what we saw in the new make spirit there as it ages through is not lost.
Oh yeah.
Cheers, Slàinte. Any other thoughts?
Just remember that sentence with the 2 characters in that whiskey. And yes, you have especially a lovely smell, but now with that sulfury touch, I don't have it as much in the nose, but you do have it in the taste.
Yeah.
And you have like that pleasantness, a little bit of a tropical note, sweetness. You find the bourbon, you find the sherry, but not as in a sherry bomb, but as in a nice side note, and it's nearly immediately complemented by a spiciness, that sulfury note, more of a hefty note, like a little bit more of an aggressive malt, I would say.
I mean, some people have described it as meaty, fairly robust, and I think when you're using worm tubs, you are going to have a bit more of a robust kind of style of character. For me, I think that sulfur note translates into, it's not just pineapple, it's toasted pineapples in a barbecue. It's not just apples, it's baked apples. You've got that kind of toasted element coming through. Someone once said, Craigellachie, it's like watching a firework in Scotland on bonfire night, but it's in Scotland because it's damp, it's wet. You're watching a firework go off in the rain. You have this kind of wet gunpowder almost notes, that kind of cordite. So I think it's a really interesting note.
Yeah, I never thought that is so. You said robust. I would say tough or rough.
Yeah, 100%.
I mean, like the warm tubs are always said to be rough.
Yeah. More rugged, more robust. I still think it's quite a mellow dram at the same time. So I know it's finding that balance, I think, between the two. Something I think is going to be really interesting, and I like to do them really quite close side by side. The next whiskey I have for you to try is one of our newer expressions, which is our Craigellachie 13-year-old Armagnac edition. So again...
So one question that I forgot to have in... Oh, we can already have
Yeah, perfect.
Is what I forgot in the production was how big is it? I mean, you have big stills, double stills. What's the production? How much is actually going into Glen-Allachie, or how much is going in somewhere else?
Yeah, of course. So I'd say, as a single malt bottling for us as Craigellachie, we've got less than probably 50% of our volume. Again, I don't want to give you an exact number because we are a blended whiskey company. The volumes can change a lot depending on what we're needing to trade for our blends, what we're using for our own blends. But I'd say at a guess, probably less than 50% of what we're making. Our total volume per year is about 4 million litres per annum we're making, which again sounds a big number. Anyone who knows a bit about Speyside, for example, we are a fairly medium size. There are definitely some smaller distilleries than us, don't get me wrong, but you have some of the big players in Speyside now are over 20 million litres. So 4 is relatively sort of small to medium.
It's good for a small business, a small distillery.
Exactly.
It packs a punch for that size of building.
And then when you think probably less than half of that is going actually into single malt, any of what you see in front of you today is still relatively, harder to find as well. So.
So it's still a 13-year-old. So what's the difference?
Still a 13 years old, yeah. So we love worm tubs. We were one of only 20 distilleries at the time of filming this to be using worm tubs in Scotland. We asked ourselves the question, we love worm tubs. We talk about all the Scotch whisky distilleries that use worm tubs, but I wonder which other spirits industries around the world also use worm tubs. So we thought, how are we going to find this out? Best person to ask? The person who'll make them. So we went to Forsyths, we spoke to Richard, and we said, who else do you make worm tubs for? And he was saying there's actually quite a variety of different spirits around the world that will use worm tubs or something similar to a worm tub. One of those was Armagnac. Again, Armagnac is this lovely, I think of it as the kind of older, more interesting cousin of cognac, right? It's proper old school. A lot of it is kind of smaller scale farm productions. They don't even have their own stills. They're brought round by horse and cart or by tractor, to do this distillation. It's old school distilling. And again, they don't call it a worm tub. That's a very Scottish guttural word. They say le serpent. Much nicer, right?
It's a French thing, right?
French thing, yeah. So very similar to our worm tub, and using that as again coming off the still. So we love that old school. It can be quite a sort of rougher, more fierier spirit. When you put it into oak, Armagnac just mellows out. And I think what you're going to see here in the nose is that Craigellachie, that DNA, that's still that lovely fruitiness and a little bit of sulfur, but it's really kind of mellowed that Craigellachie character right now. The biggest difference here from the normal 13 as well, that initial maturation, we're just looking at refill bourbon casks here. So we've got no sherry influence, no big punchy first fill casks. It's really letting that DNA, that distillery character, kind of age and come through in the expression, and then say finishing for just over a year in the Bass Armagnac cask. So I think it takes that Craigellachie character, it softens it out a little bit, it kind of rounds off the edges.
Yeah. I would say a little bit less sweet with, first fill bourbon is also very sweet with that.
Yeah.
And you said soft, definitely. I'm excited how that translates into the taste, because the other one was like nice and sweet with a bit of roughness and robustness. And,
let's have a taste. Are you ready? Cheers.
Pleasure.
What do you think?
Ooh, okay. Yeah, it's like the first one, except less sweet.
Yep.
And a bit more, I would say, mellow, or like a little bit like a silky touch or rosy touch to it. A little bit like that.
That silkiness for sure.
I don't know. I've never tried Armagnac before. Maybe I did, but didn't appreciate it.
Definitely give Armagnac a try. I think value for money and trying some really old, cool, rare things. Armagnac as a category is hard to beat.
Has also a bit of a, I don't want to say muffy note, but like old person's office leathery.
Yeah, kind of musty, I think is the
musty,
word. It's that kind of funky, kind of, It's an old school sort of taste, I'd say there as well. Again, just like we had with the Craigellachie 13, the sort of core range edition, or the regular edition, we are at 46% here. We are all natural colour. We are non-chill filtered. I will say that the 13-year-old Armagnac, we are saying it's part of our core range now, and we're looking to expand on kind of a 13-year-old range. We have the original 13, we have the Armagnac 13. Watch this space, because there's going to be some other cool 13-year-olds, I'm sure, hitting the market fairly soon.
Also, your thing is more 13-year-olds. Okay, that is cool.
I think it's a nice way to give back to fans of Craigellachie. It's not on the super old, rare, expensive side of things. It's a little bit more affordable, I think, and you can open that bottle and you can enjoy it.
Okay. So is the core range? Are you gonna look at expanding or special bottlings? What's in there for the future?
Yeah, I mean, for our range at the moment, so our core range, again, our original core range for us was a 13, a 17, a 23, and a 31. We did introduce a 19 years old, which was like a travel retail whiskey. You have very nicely brought me on to talk about the next two, because we have that 17-year-old, which is kind of again, continuation almost of the 13, a little bit more sherry casks used. And then we have finally got back that 19 years old. And we hadn't produced a batch in almost, it must be 5 years now, same as our 23 years old. Again, we don't have huge volumes. We're not a massive distillery. A lot of our whiskey has gone for blends. So sometimes, we stand by our age statements. We love our age statements at Craigellachie. So sometimes it might just mean we don't discontinue a whiskey. We just can't make a batch for a number of years. So say almost 5 years, I think, since we last saw Craigellachie 19 hitting the market.
With the old batches, it's always how much do you have on stock?
Exactly, that's
how
it.
much did you do 20 years ago?
So again, we don't have any 31 left. We are seeing some older. We've had a 33 and a 39 coming from Craigellachie as well. But after the kind of core range, we start to get into our single casks, our double casks, and our small batch. So this for us falls under the name exceptional cask. So just like you'll see with us for Royal Brackla, or you'll see for Aberfeldy, or Altmore for us as well. These are, like individual casks, or a small amount of casks kind of brought together that our malt master and our blend team have found to be something really special that they want to kind of show off, this maybe other sort of side of the Craigellachie character as well. So definitely watch out for those. I know the German market, we do send a few your way now and again. Watch that space.
There's every now and then there's one coming, and I think that's what people love. That people love to, especially like the experts. A lot of experts behind that camera. No, the thing is with the experts, they have tried a lot, and they want to see a bit behind the scenes. Like you love the core range. It's beautifully made, and Stephanie does a perfect job for that. But you want to have something. Is that some tweak in there? How can a Craigellachie whiskey work?
Exactly, yeah, and I think we joked at the beginning about the founders of the distillery, the two sides, these really interesting characters, in Alexander Edward and Peter Mackie. I always think of them like yin and yang, these opposite sides of the spectrum that somehow work incredibly well together. For me, that's what you have in a glass of Craigellachie. I think the 17 is a perfect example.
What is it matured in?
So again, very similar to the 13, where we have that initial maturation of some first fill bourbon, first fill sherry casks. Then we have some refill and rechar. So again, that combination of casks. And again, we're finishing 50-50 X, bourbon, first fill bourbon, X sherry, first fill sherry. The combination of sherry casks, usually we're getting a little bit more sherry casks involved here. And I think you can really see how that comes across in the flavour here as well. Again, what are your thoughts here for this one?
Yeah, look, it feels a little bit more like the first 13, as it's it has a sweeter note to it.
Definitely.
And it complements the distillery character very well with that pineapple.
Definitely.
Still, the thing is now, I can't make out the hefty character in the nose.
Yeah.
It was difficult here, but you could see. Okay, there is something there.
I think it's that sweetness now coming through with the sherry casks.
The sherry cask, but also I think after 17 years, the roughness is a bit
mellows out. Exactly. Craigellachie, we say literally the name Craigellachie comes from the Gaelic for sort of a village built on a rocky hill, this rocky bluff. Okay. So I always say we are the rock of Speyside. Geographically, we are the rock of Speyside, but also from our character. Where other distilleries' character has changed over the years. I think the Speyside style has softened and got more fruity. Craigellachie, we've kind of stuck to our guns, stayed to our roots. So I think you see that here. There's that, balance with the sulphur. It's a little bit more full-bodied, a little bit more rounded. Something you didn't see in the 13, I think here, there's almost like an aniseed note. It's like a little bit of sort of a licorice note in there as well. So it's quite interesting how that develops in time.
Oh yeah, nice.
Cheers, Slanja. What do you think of that one?
Yeah, but it's a bit less sweet than the 13-year-old. It has a good amount of sweetness. You feel the distillery character, but that roughness still packs a punch. In the nose, I almost lost it.
Yeah.
But in the taste, it's just...
Again, I think that's that first fill, finishing in first fill casks. It gives you that little bit more of a punch.
It has that little bit of a sulfurous touch to it. Maybe that's a bit less, but that roughness, that robustness, that spiciness a little bit is in the back of my mouth. That is a lot there in there. And it's I like it when you have sweet note, nice note, that hefty touch to it.
Yeah.
I like it.
I think, as you say, it's a different kind of sweetness from the 13, where the 13 was this kind of fruity, vibrant, kind of more upfront kind of sweetness. I think this, it's more what you associate with like a sherried sweetness. It's more kind of dark, kind of rich, kind of dried sweet notes in there as well.
I think the first full bourbon came out here a little bit more.
Okay, 100%. Again, being all natural color, you look at these bottles, you can see right away that kind of difference in color, a little bit more of an influence from the sherry cask there.
You already told a little bit about that rock. So my question is, we had a lot about discussion. How do you say that name? So we have Craigellachie, Craigellachie.
I have heard all sorts. My favorite yet was a lovely couple from America, and they said, "Oh, we thought it was a French brand." Craigellachie, still the best way I've ever heard Craigellachie pronounced. But my tip for anyone watching along: how do you say this name? We don't make especially Craigellachie Armagnac. Try spelling that. Impossible, right? We've probably made the most difficult to spell whiskey in the world. But think of like a boy's name, Craig, like Daniel Craig or Craig David, whatever. Craig, Ella, a girl's name like Ella Fitzgerald. So you've got Craig, you've got Ella, and they have a key, like a key for turning in the door. Okay. So Craig-GELLacky. Say it all together. What have you got?
Craig-GELLacky.
Craig-GELLacky. There we go. Perfect.
Okay, that is how you say it.
And on that note, to celebrate, we can now pronounce Craig-GELLacky.
Craig-GELLacky, because I probably did say it a couple of times in that video differently.
You're not the first, and you will not be the last. So, final dram in the core range that I have here today. We have the long-awaited return, as I mentioned, of the 19. We can finally see that Craigellachie 19 coming back here as well. For me, there's a menthol freshness to this. You're greeted in the nose by this lovely herbaceous freshness as well. Again, it's a very cold day here in the old cooperage here at Craigellachie. So warming it in the hand, I think, is a good idea. But you can still see we're definitely at Craigellachie. You've still got that lovely, full-bodied, kind of rounded, more kind of robust, old-fashioned Speyside style. But as I say, that fruity lift again, I think we're kind of more similar to that lightness of the 13 in character. But at the same time, say that's that freshness. It's almost a menthol kind of freshness for me.
Yeah, it is more fresh. Definitely, it has a good amount of freshness, and I would say a bit of a floweriness in there.
Yeah.
It's strange.
That's why I mean that kind of herbal notes. That's a kind of flowery note in there as well. Delicious, right?
It's strange that you changed a lot during these. I can see the distillery character is in there, but you changed a lot with the cast. You played around very well with the
again. We have one of the best whiskey makers in the world. If you're looking to create an interesting range, as soon as you see that name Stephanie McLeod on the bottle, you know it's going to be good.
Yeah.
Ready for a taste?
Just a hint of that fruitiness, bit of a tropical fruitiness, fresh fruitiness combined. Nice.
Again, 46% ABV, all natural colour, non-chill filtered. The combination for this, again, it's a combination of casks. The blending team haven't called out, it's not exactly a 50-50 finishing in first fill casks. There it can vary a little bit more, but I think what they're looking for is that kind of freshness. As Craigellachie ages, that sulfur dissipates. It kind of starts to leave, but it leaves something behind. And for me, that's kind of a weightiness in the glass as well. So although that sulfur is dissipated, leaving some of those more sort of nuanced, sort of fresh, fruity notes, I think that weight that it leaves behind is delicious.
I find it quite rough for a 19-year-old.
Okay.
I find the warm tubs and that spiciness and that rough volume combined with a bit of sweetness, I like it. That you didn't go overboard with an older whiskey, I would say, with the cask on that, because then you can still have the balance of that distillery character, roughness. I think with a hefty cask, 19 years, you could easily have that taken out.
Totally, and I think what you describe as our roughness, I'm going to choose my words here. I'm going to say it's more of a robustness. I think for me, it still is there's a smoothness to it again. So anyone listening to this thinking rough, rough I think is, it depends on where you're starting. I think for me, it's still a very smooth dram, but it's a richness, a really more kind of, it's got shoulders, right? It's a bit more rounded.
the taste is always so hard to describe.
Yeah.
You start off very smooth with that lovely sweetness and that lovely fruitiness. But then comes something that is just, you say robust, I say rough. I would say a little bit spicy, a little bit of a...
It's almost savory. There's a meatiness,
there's
I think, in it as well.
Yeah, something like that. It's hard to describe, but it has some nice twist to it, as you said, with the yin and yang. Yeah. That is cool.
Now, we've had a lovely day at Craigellachie. As I was, looking out the bottles for this tasting, I happened to find one more special bottle. You'll probably be one of the last people who gets to have a taste of this. So this is the Craigellachie 31. We have just a little bit left in the bottle there. So, for me coming from Craigellachie, because we don't have a visitor centre, you mentioned it's the distillery you always drive past, but you see in the stills in the windows, but you never actually get to stop. A lot of people didn't really know Craigellachie. There's been a few sort of special edition bottlings from the previous owners, like Flora and Fauna and things like that. We only really launched a core range as a company back at the end of 2014. And then we started to get a little bit of people, noticing us more in kind of the mainstream whiskey world. I think we've always had the geeks, have always been fans of Craigellachie, kind of the malt spotters. Coming from Craigellachie, a lot of people would be like, Craigellachie, where's that? Didn't know. Now they say, oh, you're from Craigellachie. Please, can you get us a bottle of the 31? How do we get a bottle of 31? And this is what I think really helped put Craigellachie on the map, is back in 2017, we won the world's best whiskey award for the best single malt whiskey in the world with the 31. Needless to say, as soon as we won the award, the whiskey sold out everywhere. So it's a very, very hard bottle to find now. But I wanted to give you just a little treat to finish off the tasting today.
Let me have a try on that one.
For me, this is the really tropical side of Craigellachie. Again, we're sitting at cask strength here. We're 52.2% ABV. Would you have thought it was that strong? I don't think so. I think it's really mellowed out.
I had a little bit of a smoky phenolic note in there, a little bit of that.
And that sulfur's still there, right?
Yeah, sulfur.
Even after 31 years.
But I got used to it, and now here comes the tropical fruitiness in there. What did you say in cask-wise is that?
So this is refill bourbon cask as well. Yeah, a lot of refill bourbon
I was about to say it has a lot of distillery character.
Yeah.
With 31 years, that is something special.
Yeah, so it really is that bourbon influence. As I say, you're not seeing that sherry influence here, so much more of that distillery DNA. Someone once said Craigellachie is like firing a shotgun through a pineapple, which is a very visual tasting note, right? But I think, we talked about gunpowder, cordite, that firework kind of note. So there's that kind of gunpowder-esque sulfur note, but you're blasting a pineapple to pieces, this big tropical explosion, I think, in there as well. And for me, it's the tropical note of this really comes through. It's almost like, as you go through the range, it's like a ripening banana. You've got an underripe banana here, perfectly ripe banana.
This one has a bit of
banana bread.
Yeah, banana bread, and it has a good amount of sulfuriness in there. Maybe it's the cask strength.
Yeah.
That is a bit of a comparison between these two is a bit difficult because of the strength difference.
46% all the way through here, then suddenly stepping up to 52.2.
But it has a lot of potential in that one. That is just... Yeah, I like it. The thing is, how much stock do you have for the next?
Not a lot. Even I'm not helping myself to one of these today because I want to make sure someone else gets to have a try of this. I've had a good few drams of this, but I'm glad we got to share another whiskey together. Thank you so much for visiting the distillery.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Cheers.
It was a lovely visit here, and it's nice that I can show the world how Craigellachie is made and how it's spelled or how it's pronounced that way, because no visitor center. I hope that it's gonna change in 10 or 20 years. Something.
I mean, if you guys start drinking more Craigellachie, who knows? Maybe we'll be able to get a visitor center.
It was a lovely visit here. Yeah,
perfect.
And thank you very much for watching. And if you want to get one of these whiskies, then have a look at Whisky.com and Whisky.De. You will find these whiskies there. And thank you very much for watching, and see you next time.